You are live.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, I am so excited to be at the Foley Revival House for the Fire and Glory Conference. It is a great privilege to be the first speaker tonight. I'm excited about what God is going to do. God has put a message in my heart, and it's more than just some words that I put together in my head or jotted down on a piece of paper. It's actually what's been burning in my life for years, and it's been stirred up again in me recently. And I just want to bring that life message to you and hope that it inspires you the way that it's inspired me in my life. I'm going to say a quick prayer, and then we're going to roll. Holy Spirit, come. Amen.
That's good. That's a good prayer.
On November 15, 2008, I was going to a college that was a Baptist-leaning college, but officially a non-denominational college, and I was studying business, and I was doing an internship in financial planning, and they had offered me a career once I finished college. And I'd been genuinely born again for 6.5 years. I believed in going to church, going to chapel, going to youth group or young adults, and doing homeless ministry. And I also had probably an average of 5 minutes a day of personal devotions, and that was my Christian walk, and I loved God, and that's what I do. And one day on November 15, 2008, my best friend said, "Hey, will you come to a special meeting with me?" And I said, "I don't know." And he said, I'll buy you dinner if you go to the special meeting with me. And I said, "Okay, that sounds like a good deal." And so we headed from where our college was located down to downtown Minneapolis in Minnesota. I'm from Minnesota. And as we explored the downtown accidentally because we couldn't find the location, I began to get a little bit weary. Then I put my seat back and started taking a nap. And then after 1 hour, I finally sat up and I said, "Man, you are really lost. We aren't going to find the meeting. It started almost an hour ago. Just give up." He said, "Let me try one more thing, and then I'll give up," because he had promised somebody he would try to attend this meeting, but he'd never been to one before. So he persevered, and he found it a couple of minutes later, so we snuck into the back of this meeting about an hour late. Now, officially this was something called a prophetic ministry, but I had no grid for spiritual gifts. I had no grid for the charismatic movement or divine healing or any of these kinds of things, so I didn't really know what all of that meant, but I went and sat in the back, and as the guy spoke, I can't tell you one thing that he actually honestly talked about. I'm sure it was a great sermon, or a great end to the sermon that I caught. I can't tell you what he said. All I can tell you is this. All of a sudden, as he was entering into his conclusion, I heard a voice say, "Mikey, you need to get to the front." Now, to give you some context, this is November 15, 2008. The last time I had heard that voice was in the summer of 2004. And the first time I had heard that voice was shortly after I got born again in 2002. So there's 2 times that I had heard the voice of God in my life, and both times had been so significant that it had changed my life. So I knew that voice. It had been a long time, but I knew that voice, and I knew it was important. And he said, "Mike, you need to get to the front." And I'm like, okay. He hasn't invited anybody up to the front. Within a minute or so, he stopped and he said, "Okay, I'm just going to wrap up there, but I'm going to open up the altar, but I'm only waiting for 45 seconds because the Holy Spirit's already told you if you need to be up at this altar." And I was like, "That's me." So I ran from the very back row to the front. To this day, I pray I didn't run over any elderly women on my way up there. But I blitzed to the front of that church, and I dove down at the altar, and before anybody could get to me to pray for me, I heard 2 things from God. He said, "Micah, stop the direction you're going," which I knew to be what I thought I was going to do with my life, to make a lot of money and tithe 10% and raise a family. And the second thing he said to me was, "Micah, you know a lot about me, but you know me very little." And that sentence would actually change the whole course and direction of my life. What I want to share with you this morning is I believe that was the invitation in my life to a personal relationship with the God of the universe. See, before that I'd only heard the voice of God twice in my life, but that began a string of hearing God's voice on a daily basis, of actually getting to know God, of going deeper in the things of God, of entering into a Christian life that I didn't even know was possible. But I don't think that this is something that's supposed to be unique. I don't think that this is what God just intended for Micah. It was amazing how he's kind of sovereignly plucked me out of my life. But I think this is actually what God desires for every one of his children, to enter into a deeper relationship with him, to hear his voice, to know him personally and intimately. And I want to talk about it a little bit from the story of Abraham this morning. So open with me if you have your Bibles. If you don't, listen well. To Genesis 11:31. Now, growing up in the Christian world, I heard the story of Abraham taught and preached many times. And if they started at the beginning, they usually always started in Genesis chapter 12. But I actually wanted to start at the end of Genesis chapter 11 and make a specific point. Genesis 11:31. If you're there, say grace.
Grace.
Hallelujah. One person brought that Bible. The rest of you feel conviction of the Holy Ghost.
Did I just get filled or what?
Genesis 11:31. Terah took Abram his son, and Lot the son of Haran his grandson, and Sarai his daughter-in-law, his son Abram's wife, and they went out together from Ur of the Chaldeans in order to enter the land of Canaan, and they went as far as Haran and settled there. The days of Terah were 205 years, and Terah died in Haran. Now the Lord said to Abraham, go forth from your country and from your relatives and from your father's house to the land which I will show you. How many of you know that the land which he showed Abraham was Canaan? So this is speculation. I can't prove this to you because I'm basically reading between the lines. But Abram's father actually takes his son and his son's wife and Lot and his wife, takes his family and leaves his home village and heads out for Canaan, where Abram will actually ultimately end up being called, but he stops halfway and settles down. And there's two points I want to make from this. First of all, your parents' relationship with God, your spiritual parents' relationship with God, your mentor's relationship with God will only take you so far. At some point, you need to have a relationship yourself. You need to hear God's voice for yourself. You need to have your own call from God. That's the first point I want to make. The second point I want to make is what happened to Terah, I think, is a danger that most Christians fall into. And let me say it this way. I honestly believe that God could be known as the God of Terah, Abram, and Isaac instead of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob if he had continued all the way to Canaan. But he stopped halfway, so God had to call his son after his death to go the rest of the way. What is the danger? Many Christians start out on their journey with God, and they hear God's voice, they hear his calling, they hear his stirring, they get that passionate moment, and they leave and they set out. But at some point along the way, they stop somewhere comfortable. They find their comfort zone. They find their bubble. They find, okay, this is kind of how I can do life and manage my life. And they don't want to continue into more unknowns, into more risk. But the journey with God, the deeper life with God, is a continuous life of risk, a continuous life of hearing his voice and living from adventure to adventure, from call to call, step by step. The exciting thing about this is only the beginning of the journey. Sometimes people hear that Abraham set out and left everything and followed God. Some people hear my story and they say, okay, you left your chance at the business world, you left your state and you headed out into the missionary world. Wow, you must be an amazing Christian. No, that was only the beginning. I didn't know God yet. I was only getting to know God. That was the very beginning of the journey, not the end. So let's continue on from there. Let's go to Genesis chapter 18. So now Abram's been on this journey with God, getting to know God for himself. God has come and made promises to him at different points. So he's developing this relationship with God. And there's a verse in Genesis chapter 18 that just really provokes me. In Genesis chapter 18, verse 17, the Lord said, "Shall I hide from Abraham what I am about to do?" See, God is about to bring judgment on Sodom and Gomorrah. and their sins have cried out to God to the point that he feels he has to come down and do something about it. And as he's going to do it, he stops and he says, wait, I can't do this without telling my friend first. Now this provokes me. I said to myself, at what point does God stop and say, before I allow the next president to become president of the United States, before the next major political thing happens, before the next major natural disaster happens, I can't do this thing until I stop and tell my friend Micah. I challenge you, friends. There are deeper things in God. There are higher levels of relationship with God. There are deeper levels of hearing God's voice. And this provokes me. I say, God, I want to be in that place where you don't want to take a major action on the earth without letting me know first.
Mm.
My friends, I still don't believe that's the pinnacle of Abraham's journey. Ooh. Well, let me actually just make one more point from that story. I think we also learned something about the heart of Abraham in what comes after that. You guys are all familiar with the story, so I won't read the whole story. But Abraham, essentially, God comes and tells him what he's about to do, and Abraham pleads with God, will you destroy the city? Will you destroy the righteous with the unrighteous? And he pleads down from 50 all the way down to 10, and then they can't find 10, and God destroys the city. But I want to show you something that we can also learn about what a friend of God is like. See, well, Lot, though not committing the sins of the people around him, is down, living life with the people around him, trying to make money, trying to do life. You have Abraham, the friend of God, up on a mountain looking down a city, and there's only one man down there that he actually knows personally, and that's Lot. One family, I should say, Lot and his family. And in a whole city of people he doesn't know or doesn't have any natural affection to, and yet, because he has captured the heart of God, and the heart of God is love for people, because he has tapped into the heart of God, he actually cares about the city. And so while they're just going about their business, here is Abraham on a mountain with God, interceding for people that he doesn't even know. Standing before God and saying, will you destroy them? Now, Abraham, the father of the faith, I hate to question anything that he did. And God forgive me. But I can't help but think that he maybe made one mistake. Let's just leave it at maybe. Maybe he made one mistake. You see, Abraham comes to God and says, will you destroy the righteous with the unrighteous? And he starts pleading with God on behalf of the righteousness of man. I would suggest Moses took a little better approach when God was about to destroy Israel in Exodus 34, I believe it is. And Moses says, God, if you do this, people will blaspheme your name. And he appeals to God on the basis of God's character. I think Moses, bear with me, maybe was a little bit more advanced of an intercessor at that point than Abraham, who appealed to God based on man's righteousness. Moses appealed to God based on his character. I would suggest to you, when you go to intercede on behalf of your family, on behalf of the city, don't appeal to God based on how good they are, on why they deserve it. Don't list to them the reasons why God should have, why they've done isn't that bad, why on a human level they should be in. Appeal to God on the basis of his character and his nature. Appeal to the mercy of God. Before I get too far down that rabbit trail, get back to the life of Abraham and knowing God. I want to go to actually the most famous story in Abraham's life, the story of Abraham and Isaac. So, everyone that's been in the Christian world for any amount of time has heard this story, told a lot of different ways, preached a lot of different ways. There's so much to draw from this. Abraham is, as I've mentioned before, the father of the faith. His obedience to God, his immediate obedience to God, all of these things are amazing. It's awesome to think about, like, what he must have been going through emotionally and all of these types of things. All of that is valuable. But personally, every time I heard that story told and talked about and preached, they always talked about it mostly from the perspective of what was going on inside of Abraham. What was Abraham's emotions? What was his thought? What was his faith? What were those things? And it was just a few months ago that all of a sudden this question was birthed in my heart. What was going on in the heart of God? What was going on in the heart of God? In Genesis 22:2 it says, God says to Abraham, "Take now your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac, and go to the land of Moriah, and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains which I will tell you." You see, in the book of Revelation, it tells us the Lamb was slain from the foundation of the world. And I think in the heart of God, he called a man, Abraham, and said, "Will you finish your father's journey into Canaan? Will you obey me?" And Abraham said yes, and he left everything and started to live by the voice of God in faith. And as Abraham lived this lifestyle with God, he became a friend of God, he became an intercessor, he got to know God more. And I believe they developed a very close relationship. Abraham is one of the few people known as a friend of God in the Bible. And I think this is really the climax of it. God says, you have been my friends. You have obeyed me. You have gone on this journey. And I believe the creator of the universe, the God who made everything, who's outside of time, looked 2,000 years into the future and saw himself sacrificing his son for the sake of all of humanity, including Abraham. And God had this question in his heart. Is it possible that a man loves me the way that I love them? Is it possible for a human being to love me like I love them? And so he says, if anybody could possibly love me the way I love them, it's Abraham. See, the Lamb was slain from the foundation of the world. That means that God had already loved him. We love because he first loved us. So God had already loved Abraham in this way. He had already credited Abraham as righteous. Abraham had already been able to enter into right relationship with God on the basis of what Jesus was actually going to do in the future. And God says, I've loved you like this, and you don't even fully know it yet. You won't understand it until eternity. Yeah. But will you love me that way, my friend Abraham? And Abraham answered that call. Abraham did one of the most incredible things I think anybody has done besides Jesus. And I think that's probably one of the reasons that he has talked about, he and Moses have talked about more than anybody else in the Old Testament characters. But my friends, I would suggest to you that this is not a one-time thing that just happened with a guy 4,000 years ago. This is actually the invitation of God to all of us. Will you set out on a journey with me? Will you go further than your parents' ceiling? Will you go further than your spiritual father's ceiling? Will you continue on your journey of hearing my voice and obeying me? Will you enter into friendship with me? Will you do what others will not do? When others are watching TV, will you pray and seek my face? When others are playing video games, will you be on your knees worshiping me? When nobody is looking and nobody knows about it, will you fast while others are eating, drinking, and being merry? And it's not just spiritual disciplines. I'm not here to preach to you spiritual disciplines, but is there somebody that desires to take hold of me? Do you desire to take hold of me enough that you will do what others won't do? Because, my friends, if you want to go deeper with God than the people around you are going, than the average person is going, than most Christians are going, if you want to enter into an Abraham-like relationship, if you want to enter into a Moses-like relationship, you can't just do the same things as the person to your left and right. You see, shortly after I had heard the voice of God for the third time, a month later, an old lady would lay hands on me and pray for me to be baptized in the Holy Spirit. I would have an encounter with God for 2 hours. I would enter into that. I would go on to have my first couple of visions. And one of those visions, I saw all of my Christian friends, the Christian leaders I looked up to, my parents, all of them, going down the river beside me. And I heard God say, and we were all enjoying life together. We were all doing life together, and it was good. And it was right. And I think we were on our way to heaven. And God said to me, Mike, I've called you to swim upstream. Will you stop and swim upstream? Will you go a direction that none of them are going? And I got to the point where I said yes. I said, yeah, God. If I never see my family again, if I never see my friends again, if I never get to play sports again, if I never watch another TV show, if I never see another movie in my life, if I never have an earthly comfort again, it's worth it if I can know you. If I can know you in ways that people don't know you. And there was not one single day after that that I ever regretted that. I'll conclude with this. In the 1600s, there was a group of people that began to pray day and night. Actually, for 100 years, they were the Moravians. And two young men that were birthed in that movement in their early 20s. One day they heard about a slave owner in the West Indies. And this guy was a very wealthy slave owner. And he was an atheist. And he said he was never going to allow any minister of the gospel to ever come to his island and share Jesus with all of his hundreds of slaves. And these two young men in their early 20s, they heard about this. And they heard the call of God saying, will you go? And so they left their lives, they left everything, and they got on a ship. And as their family wept, and as the people around them questioned the wisdom of it, these two young guys in their 20s, see, to go to that island, they couldn't go there as visitors. No visitors were welcome. They got there on a one-way ticket by agreeing to be lifetime slaves themselves to this slave owner. And as they left, to become lifetime slaves on an island that they didn't know anything about, giving up their chance to live a normal life in their country, in the world that they knew. As people were weeping and as people were wondering why two guys would do this, as the ship began to sail away, one of them put his arm around the other one and looked out at the crowd and yelled out, "May the Lamb who was slain receive the reward of his suffering." Wow. See, they got it. They had gone beyond obeying God, beyond loving people, being friends with God. They had gotten to the point that what mattered to them was loving Jesus the way that he had loved them. And that's my prayer for each one of you today, and for myself. I'm just going to say a prayer. Oh, Jesus. Holy Spirit, you are good. May nobody in this room feel condemned, but may everybody in this room feel challenged. And more than challenged, may we be changed. May we be transformed. May we live tonight differently than we lived last night. May we live tomorrow differently than we lived the day before, because our hunger is ever growing for you, because we're going from glory to glory, strength to strength, and faith to faith. Take me and take all of us deeper than we've ever gone before. Take us from water to the ankles to waters to the knees. Take us from water to the knees to water to the waist. Take us from water to the waist to water to the shoulders. And take us in over our heads to that place where we can only breathe by the Spirit of God. We love you, Jesus. Amen. Thank you, guys.